I like it because
We will finish this later, but right now we're going to welcome Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated. And Albert, appreciate you taking some time to hang out with us today. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Good, Albert. Albert, look over your left shoulder. What's on the second shelf right there?
Oh, this guy.
You see that right there?
One?
Left shoulder. That's
Talking to a Buckeye.
My left? That's my
that right there. You see that right there? Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
It's actually like Eli Apple's helmet from. I'm serious. You see the 13 there? I think from the championship year, if I remember right. So yeah.
Wow.
I see quality goods. When I recognize them, I know they're quality goods.
Man,
Well, we got a couple like championship SI covers back there too. Yeah, this place is all decked out.
Albert, let me get into this. I think I heard you on another platform talking about this a little bit. We were talking about the Browns' biggest needs going into this offseason. And a lot of people say defensive tackle, right? A lot of people say go get a defensive tackle. But for me, I asked Jason this too. I think the more bang for your buck is that receiver. I think you'll get a quicker turn on an investment. I think it's easier to find a receiver maybe outside of the draft to use and to get. Do you think the number one priority is defensive tackle, or would you say because of Deshaun Watson, receiver might be just edging out defensive tackle?
Well, I think like just to compete right now in the environment that you have in the NFL, and you look at like what you're going to be up against, and you look at what the teams you're going to have to go through to win in the AFC have, you have to be able to score, and you have to be able to score in bunches. And, you see the way that Cincinnati was able to jump all over the Bills on Sunday with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. And then that was a Bills team that rolls Stephon Diggs out there. And, I on Sunday, like, even though like the Chiefs don't have Tyreek Hill anymore, they still have a good volume of guys. And, Travis Kelce, obviously a top-end tight end, and also Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Sky Moore. And so, I think part of winning in the NFL right now is winning in the environment that you're in. And the environment in the AFC right now is such where, I think you've got to be able to score with these teams. And so I think the Browns certainly have to ask that question is, do you have enough skill talent around the quarterback? I think the offensive line is good enough. And I think they've done a good job just stocking those positions and being in a good position there. And, certainly the tackles with Wills and Conklin. And, I think beyond Amari Cooper, you do have some questions at receiver. And, thankfully for the Browns, the one thing is, like we've seen over the last couple of years, receivers tend to come available in the offseason. Like last year at this point, no one would have thought Tyreek Hill or A.J. Brown would have been available. They were. And then there should be some opportunities in the draft too. And it doesn't have to be in the first round, which is good for the Browns because they don't have a first-round pick.
Albert, that's kind of the point I made earlier was I thought you could find a receiver in the second round who could play right away and help you win, but you might have a harder time finding a tackle or defensive end. So go the free agency route for tackle or end. But who realistically Deron Payne's probably going back to Washington, right? Like he'd be a terrific fit in Cleveland, but I can't believe the Commanders would let him go. So realistically, who really is going to be available to help them along the front four in free agency?
Jason, I'm going to plead ignorance here. I wish I had my free agent list up in front of me.
Yeah, I know.
I do think like that's a position that you can address, in the draft. And I think if you look at like some of the guys that, have come into the league over the last few years, and you can find guys now, you can't find, there aren't very many like high end guys. So if you're talking about finding like a Fletcher Cox or obviously an Aaron Donald, or a guy in that level, those are few and far between. But can you find guys to sort of fill out the depth chart? You can find those guys, So, like a Mozzie Smith from Michigan is probably going to be available to you in the second round. Is somebody like him worth a swing? I think that those are the sorts of answers that you will be able to find. And again, I'd have to look at the veteran market, but I think generally, when you're looking at guys along the defensive line on the veteran market, you probably be looking at guys the level below Deron Payne. And I'll pull up the list now if that's helpful to you guys, because I just haven't done all my work on free agency quite yet.
Well, while we're talking defense, how much change do you think? Because the Browns haven't made any changes to the defensive staff other than Joe Woods, obviously, and bringing in Jim Schwartz. Yeah. I would think Jim's going to want his own guys in here. So how long do you think it'll be before they start making changes and Jim starts – like, do we have to get after the Super Bowl, or when do you start thinking defensive staff turnover could start?
Well, by the way, the other name I would give you here, Javon Hargrave could be an interesting name that's available with the Eagles, from Philly. Like he's an excellent player. He's come on for them. He's one of their best players right now. Are they going to be able to afford to keep him with all the different guys they're playing or they're paying? That would be one who wouldn't be, he's a little older, so he wouldn't be a long-term answer, but somebody who could fill a hole for you. Sheldon Rankin. So there are some names out there, some guys that are relatively accomplished. I would say that the one benefit, like if you want to look at the difference between the candidates, right? The one benefit in hiring Jim Schwartz over a Brian Flores, or a Gerard Mayo, guys that I think were under heavy consideration by the Browns, is Schwartz is a little bit closer schematically to what Joe Woods was doing. And so I think that helps you on a couple fronts. It helps you with your coaches, and that your coaches are going to probably be more adaptable to what Jim Schwartz is going to do. And I think the other piece of it is that your personnel is probably not going to need to be flipped upside down. Whereas if you were going to stock the cupboard for a Brian Flores or a Gerard Mayo, I think you'd be talking about relatively wholesale change in the way that you fill out your front. So I actually think like that is one of the benefits, of hiring Schwartz is, the guys that you already have in house are probably pretty adaptable to how he wants to play defense.
Well, I would say this. Here's a question, Albert. Are the Browns window of opportunity, with the bodies we have, we don't have a lot of bandwidth, I don't think, before this thing starts to get frayed if it doesn't go the right way. So is it better for the Browns to really get in the free agent market to find the DT, and then use the pick on something that can hit quickly, right? That's where our problems seem to be.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at is probably like you guys had said earlier, that the receiver might be able to contribute faster. And recent history tells us you can find receivers in the second round. I mean, I go back to the 2019 draft and the amount of guys who were taken outside of the first round that hit, and it wound up being better than the first rounders that year. So you want to go down the list: A.J. Brown, D.K. Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, and Deebo Samuel were all outside of the first round that year.
Wow.
So, and there's a history of this too. Like that's not unusual. Like Michael Thomas was a second rounder. There's a lot of examples of guys who not only could play outside of the first round at receiver, but could play early. And that's sort of a result of what's happening in the sport in general, that so many of the best athletes are gravitating towards that position. And so you have guys that are playing a lot of 7-on-7, catching the ball a lot. They're in pass-happy offenses in college, and they're competing with other great athletes for playing time. So by the time they get to the NFL, they're a little bit more ready to compete. I would say this about like their general approach to the offseason. Look, I think to some degree, Kevin Stefanski and his staff were given a mulligan. Now, I know Joe Woods is gone, but I think to some degree, I think people inside that organization looked at the position that those coaches were put in, with Deshaun Watson missing the first 11 games of the year, and said that's a really difficult situation for any coaching staff to navigate. That's gone now. So, I think there's pressure on a lot of people inside that building to win now, to prove that they can be the right people to work with Deshaun Watson now. And so, I think it sort of behooves everyone in that building, if they're being tested this year, to be aggressive in how they build the team. And so, I think, wanting to get more out of Deshaun Watson is definitely a piece of this. But also like the ownership wanting to get answers on Kevin Stefanski and whether or not he's the right guy to lead this group in 2024, I think is a part of it too. So, I that's why I think that there's a chance that they've got a big swing or two in them on the veteran market. And that's why I think they have to be aggressive in building the team, because I do think not for everybody in the organization, but for certain people in the organization, this is shaping up to be a really, really important year.
Albert, what do the league and the executives and people you're hearing from, what are their thoughts about Deshaun Watson coming off the season that he had? Are they still high on him, or has he slipped a little bit?
I think that I would say it's like TBD. I would say the pieces of feedback I've gotten from even people inside the Browns building is they aren't sure how good a fit the offense that Kevin Stefanski has been running the last few years is for Deshaun Watson. And that maybe there was a little bit of like that awkwardness where it's, all right, we're building this offense for the other 10 guys in the huddle as well, but we have to build it for Deshaun. And oh, by the way, Deshaun's not going to be there for the first 11 games of the season. So we have to get the team ready to play over the first 11 weeks of the season while still trying to build in stuff for Deshaun. I think what this offseason is going to do is going to afford them the chance to build an offense for Deshaun Watson. And I think that could wind up looking different than what they've done over Kevin Stefanski's first 3 years, where what they've run is really sort of an offshoot of Gary Kubiak's offense out of that Shanahan family. So I think that there's going to be change schematically in what they do. I think there's probably going to be more of an effort to play Deshaun out of the gun, to get him to get the field spread out a little bit more, which could necessitate better numbers at receiver. And I think get him in a position where he's doing the things that he was comfortable doing in Houston and the things he was comfortable doing at Clemson. A lot of people don't realize this, but that's sort of what Billy O'Brien did with Deshaun Watson when Deshaun was at his best, in Houston, is they were borrowing ideas and concepts from Clemson to try to bring his greatest strengths out. So that's why I think that this is going to be a pretty important set of OTAs, mini camp, and then, of course, training camp in figuring out who you want to be offensively now that Deshaun Watson is going to be your quarterback for a full year.
So what does that look like?
I think it looks. I think again, like I think Jason, you go back and you look at the things he did well at Clemson, and you look at like how at Clemson and in Houston they used him. They didn't tax him as a runner that much, but they used the threat of him running a lot. And you sort of look at the run game that they had there in Houston under Billy O'Brien, and then at Clemson, and there was always a threat of him running, which opened things up in the running game, which you could use Nick Chubb that way, and then building the passing game off of that. And, I think what it did was it allowed Deshaun to play really fast and get the ball out of his hands fast. And he's got great arm talent, and he's accurate. And so there are so many things that he does well. Why not highlight those things? I think the main thing is just getting him playing fast. I do think there was a feeling that the way that they played offense there last year and the way the scheme worked may have slowed him down a little bit. And I think the idea is going to be to try to speed him back up where the offense just has I'd say a sleeker look to it, where things are happening faster and the defense is having to react to what the Browns are doing quicker.
So Albert, what does that do to Chubb's numbers? Because you sent him back in the gun, right? What's that going to do to Chubb?
I think it actually could wind up opening stuff up for him. I do think and look, like if you look at Clemson's backs over the years, I guess Travis Etienne's probably the best example of it. When you're playing that way, you generally want players who excel in space, and Chubb's a little bit of a different guy than that, but I still think like there's a place for a guy like Nick Chubb in this, and that if you can get Deshaun Watson as a real run threat out there, use that to kind of spread the defense horizontally. And, then you've got the threat of him pulling the ball and throwing it 30 yards downfield. Now you could have a defense that's sort of stretched out, and you've got like this hammer of a tailback running right into the middle of it, So it's different. Like I think it looks different than maybe what you guys have been used to and watching one of the best backs in football perform over the last few years. But I would say look at the example of Isaiah Pacheco, in Kansas City. And that's not to say like Clyde Edwards-Helaire wasn't a good fit, but there's a reason why they're using Pacheco more. And a big part of it is because to play against the Chiefs now, you want to put speed on the field, right? Yeah. You want to have people who can run with the receivers. You want to have people who can chase down Patrick Mahomes, who can keep up with him when he plays outside of structure. Well, if you're putting more speed on the field, you're probably getting smaller out there, and you're probably putting extra defensive backs out there, right? And now when you've got a guy who runs like Isaiah Pacheco coming at them, that's a real freaking problem. You know what I mean? So I think that's sort of the idea here is like Nick Chubb can be the guy who can make you pay for doing different things to deal with that sort of offense.
So here's a question. I heard this floating around yesterday in the ethos. What if the Browns would have moved Chubb for a bunch of wealth, right? And then get another back. If you're saying
here's the problem. What can you get for him at this point?
For Chubb?
Yeah.
Oh, a great deal if somebody doing their business. A great deal.
I mean,
I don't think so.
I understand.
We're not
He's
getting
a
more than
player.
a second.
He's a great player. All right. And I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying here. He's a fantastic player. I'm just telling you the market at that position in the NFL is really, really soft and has been for a while. And you can see it in what backs get in free agency. And when a guy has mileage, like Chubb has mileage, teams are hesitant to give up high-end capital for him.
So would you?
In other words, you look at him right now, right? So he's got 5 years on his legs, and he's been a bell cow in Cleveland. So he's gotten the ball a lot, right? If you're a team, the way you're looking at it is, would I trade a second-round pick for him? Well, that second-round pick is going to be on my roster on the cheap for 4 years. How many years are you getting out of Chubb if you trade for him? How many years does he have before he starts to feel it?
Well, you know the life of a running back. But give me what about this? I take Chubb, send him to Dallas for Pollard, and give me some other people beside Pollard. You think Jerry Jones
Pollard's
will go for
a free agent, but I'll take your if Cowboys, but I'll take your idea, right?
Okay.
If the Cowboys trade for Chubb, aren't they just sort of trading for Zeke Elliott 2 years ago?
No, because Zeke Elliott is probably not coming back in Dallas, right? So
No. I know what you're saying, but they're dealing with that on Zeke now. You know what I mean? Zeke was a great player 3 years ago, and he slowed down. So if you're Dallas, do you look at that and say, well, I just went through this with Zeke Elliott, so do I want another running back in the back end? I think that's the problem with it is if you're looking at it, you're saying, all right, maybe I get a year or two of great play out of Nick Chubb, but then where am I? Or am I better off? I mean, remember, Pacheco was a 7th-round pick. Right. You know what I mean? That's the thing about it.
McCaffrey brought a second, third, and a fourth. That's it. I'd rather have Nick Chubb than a second.
McCaffrey's got great passing game value.
Yeah, absolutely. And he still only got a second, third. I'm saying I'd rather have Nick Chubb than a second, third, and fourth.
But you're missing this. We need volume. We got a lot of holes to fill here.
I'm aware. Right. I'd still rather have Nick Chubb. And if you're trying to win, you can win more with Nick Chubb than without him.
Jason, that's the point I'm trying to make here. Yeah. And I do think, does it come to a point where the trade isn't worth giving up the player?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sometimes.
He's meant so much.
Sometimes.
Just as far as what Nick Chubb is a tone setter, right? And what he's meant to your locker room and how important he's been culturally for what you've built. And he's not the loudest guy, but he sets a great example for everybody else.
There's no question
I know
about
the way
that.
they feel about him. And your identity has been built around him, really offensively, since Stefanski got there. So at what point do you look at it and say, the draft pick ain't worth it?
That's right.
That's right. I guess I go back to this, Albert. If the style is not going to mesh with what gets Watson his money off, right, then you have a conflict here, right? No matter what he's doing in the locker room.
I'm saying that there's a way to make it work. And that's why I use the Pacheco example.
Okay.
I think what Kansas City is doing with Isaiah Pacheco right now
I got you.
is sort of the way it would look. Where it's maybe you're not handing him the ball 25 times in a game, but like he is back there to make defenses pay for getting light on you, and putting the extra defensive back out there on you.
Okay.
I think you see it with Joe Mixon, in Cincinnati to a degree. Like Joe Mixon is 230 pounds. And when they're running 3 receivers out there, 4 receivers out there, and Joe Burrow's throwing it all over the yard, now all of a sudden there are 6 defensive backs out there. He's going to have trouble. Who's going to have trouble tackling a 230-pound running back is those defensive backs.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's sort of how Chubb would fit into
I got you.
what I think will be a reimagined offense in Cleveland.
Albert, let me give you one last question before we let you get out of here. And it's not really about the Browns. It's about one of our AFC North foes. The Baltimore Ravens, what are they doing with Lamar Jackson? Did they eventually get a deal done? Have they soured on him a little bit? What are your thoughts about what Lamar Jackson wants and what his value is and how they're going to work that out in Baltimore?
Yeah, I don't think they've soured on him. Like, I don't think that's the right way to characterize it. I think there's just a fundamental issue with the way the contract's going to be structured. The Ravens are willing to pay him at the top of the market, but they'll only do it on a traditional quarterback contract. Lamar wants something like what Deshaun Watson got, which is a fully guaranteed contract. And it's tough to bridge that. There are ways creatively you can, fix some of it, but it's tough to really bridge that gap. And so I think the one thing about Lamar that makes this unpredictable is he's a different guy. And I think, this isn't about chasing money. I think there's part of this that's principle. And I think the best way to explain that is if you're Lamar Jackson and you just put your body on the line for 5 years at an unprecedented level for a quarterback, right? No quarterback has ever carried the ball as much as he carried it the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. And it's starting to chip away at your health. Like the first 3 years in the league, he was relatively healthy. The last 2, he finished the year injured. And now you've done all of that and you've put your body on the line that way for your team. And now your team is putting a contract in front of you that gives the team injury protection 3 or 4 years ago. How are you going to look at that? 3 or 4 years from now, how are you going to look at that? So I think that's a big part of it is the principle of it for Lamar Jackson. And I don't know what's going to bridge that gap. I do think that there's a genuine desire on both sides to get something done, but this is definitely a lot more awkward than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
Albert, we appreciate you for coming on and spending a little time with you. We'll definitely talk to you soon. And we got to get you a Bobcat helmet back there, too.
No, he got a nice sweatshirt on. Everything looks great.
It looks great. I got a couple of them. We can get you another one, man.
Man, do they even sell that stuff?
The white one, or do they have alternate ones now? They got the matte black ones, right?
Say no more. If you want the matte black one, we get you together now. But it got to go right over here. I don't know what this little left-hand one is, but we'll get you together, man.
I think I need to update my Ohio State one too. I think I could use one with like a visor and some more Buckeye leaves on it.
A little swag, man.
We could get you a Tyvis Powell signed one. How about that?
There you go.
I would like that. You guys can send that right along.
He sounds so excited, not.
You guys need my address?
Social Security number and your mother's maiden name. If you don't mind, just so we don't get lost in the mail.
That's crazy.
Albert, we appreciate you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Albert.
Albert.
All right, guys.
My goodness. Yeah, we got to get you. See,
For my money, he is the most tied in. I don't count the NFL Network guys. That's inside.
He's on top of his game.
Albert